Good evening. Welcome to everyone. And welcome to Sweet Home Chicago, a special program being presented to you tonight by H.O.M.E. And I am Steve Bynum, and I'm going to describe myself as an African-American man wearing a blue shirt, glasses, and a very scraggly beard. And it's such a pleasure to be here because when I first heard about this organization, well over a year ago, I knew that it touched my heart in a special way because intergenerational housing is more than just finding a placeholder for our elderly. It is the repository of our collective memory. These people are who define us. They are our living wisdom. And so I am extremely honored to be here. And I want to just say a few things that over the course of this program, because accessibility is very important to H.O.M.E, all presenters will auto-describe themselves for people who have vision impairment. And so to talk about H.O.M.E, this organization, providing intergenerational housing and housing support services to seniors with low incomes in the city of Chicago. And the Salmon family, Michelle and Lilo Salmon, founded H.O.M.E in 1982 with a vision of bringing the concept of intergenerational housing to the United States. As the former producer for Worldview on WBEZ, this type of housing was not alien to me nor to our audience because it was considered expected that we would take care of our elderly as they took care of us, and then we pay back the blessing to them. And that intergenerational and extended families and living is something that's not unusual to people of color in this country and other ethnic communities. But unfortunately, even within those communities, it's becoming far too infrequent. So today, H.O.M.E, the organization that's sponsoring this event, has 3 intergenerational housing buildings and operates a home repair service, a shopping bus, and provides moving assistance to seniors in Chicago. Now, its largest housing building, the Nathalie Salmon House, is named after the Salmon's late daughter, Lilo, who passed away last year. The mother passed away last year. And Nathalie's father, Michelle, will celebrate his 90th birthday tomorrow. So many blessed years to you for your 90th birthday. And so let's talk about this, the event format for H.O.M.E. We're going to show a wonderful film that's coming up. We're going to have a panel discussion with Q&A, and you will have the opportunity to put your questions into the Q&A box, because sometimes I can get confused. I'll speak for myself between the chat box and the Q&A box. So you have the opportunity. As a matter of fact, I've said hello to you. By all means, say hello to us. Say hello in the chat box right now and to let us know that you're there. And you can place your questions in the Q&A section, and then our staff will go through those questions, and then we will ask them to our panelists at the end of our discussion. Hi from Alice. Hi back to you. Hi to Katie. Wonderful. So glad that you're here. And so some other housekeeping notes. We will also have closed captioning availability. So there's a closed captioning icon in the bottom bar. I'm looking at it on the right-hand corner. It says CC Live Transcript. So all you have to do is just click the caret there, show subtitles to activate, and then you'll have closed captioning availability. And so also that you know, we are recording this event. And so please be aware that anything you say or type or write will be out there for perpetuity. So please be careful. And then finally, as you all know, because Zoom is our living nightmare in so many ways, we can't control everything. Our staff has worked extremely hard here at H.O.M.E to make sure that this night goes by as flawlessly and as smoothly as possible. But sometimes hiccups happen, lines drop, Wi-Fi goes out, the camera goes dead, any number of things. And so we just ask for your grace and your patience, because we will work very fast and very hard to get back on track when these things happen. And so right now I'd like to talk about some of the more fun parts of the evening. And to do that, I'm going to introduce Beth LaBrosse. She is Housing Support Specialist at H.O.M.E, and Nathalie Salmon House. She's going to say hello to you.
Hello. And hello from the seniors here at Nathalie Salmon House. My name is Beth LaBrosse. I am, just to let everyone know, I am Caucasian with brown hair and blue eyes. And I am here with a vast cross-section of seniors right here at Nathalie Salmon House. And we're all looking forward to staying with you and watching the film today and doing a raffle right afterwards for prizes for anything from master class to some dinners out. So catch you later.
Thank you so much, Beth. I've had the pleasure of being in the large home, and I gotta say it was one of the more touching experiences of my life. And so hello to everyone there. And so right now we're gonna bring on what's going to happen when you gift H.O.M.E in supporting its mission to support elderly people in intergenerational living. And so I don't like the word donation because it just seems sort of haughty. I'm going to donate to you, but rather your gift, rather your generosity, your blessing to the seniors and the families that live in home residences. And so we're going to share some information, and over the course of the evening, and even after this event is over, please go to homeseniors.org/donate. I repeat, homeseniors.org/donate in order to give your gift. And certainly that link will be good long after this hour is over. So please don't forget about us and go to homeseniors.org/donate. And just to give you an idea of some of the things that you're going to help do for us by raising awareness and the benefits of intergenerational housing, and also to raise resources so that organizations like H.O.M.E can continue to provide it to seniors, especially with lower incomes. And so what does your money do? Let's say, for example, a $50 contribution funds a community activity for our residents. $500 will cover the cost to move one senior to more accommodating housing. And then for $5,000, that's the cost to cover 6 months of affordable rent for a senior resident. And so please be generous. And then most importantly, a very generous anonymous donor will match dollar for dollar up to $10,000. So please, by all means, tonight especially, up to $10,000, your donations will be matched. And actually, it will have the multiplier effect even without an anonymous donor, because the more you give, the more you bless these seniors, the more incredible work that H.O.M.E will do and spread the word. And so it'll just, the ripples will go on and on and going on. So please go to homeseniors.org/donate to give your gift. And so right now, it's really my pleasure to introduce this video because I've never seen it. And I'm a big fan of Bill Murray. And so way back in 1992, actor and Chicagoan, famous Chicagoan and Cubs fan, Bill Murray, and filmmaker Loretta Smith came together to help fund Nathalie Salmon House and to raise awareness of the intergenerational model. So please sit back and enjoy this video.
This is something I've always wanted to do. There's a cop right over there.
To me, way, hey, go away.
Better?
The Lincoln Park Pirates.
You're more.
From Wilmette to Gary, there's nothing so hairy. We always collect our fees. To me, way, hey, go away. Now citizens gather around, and I think it's enough. And let's call it bluff. Let's tow the bum out of town.
We're standing on an empty lot on Sheridan Road in Chicago. And there's nothing here yet, but there is going to be. Because this lot is now owned by H.O.M.E. H.O.M.E is an organization founded 10 years ago to provide housing for the elderly poor. It's an organization that I'm crazy about, just crazy about. It was founded by two friends of mine, Lilo and Michael Salmon. Michael and Lilo met in Chicago in the 60s after they'd come here from Europe to do social work. Michael had come from France with the Little Brothers of the Poor, and Lilo was a swinging exchange student from Germany. They found they shared common professional interests and decided to make it personal.
We started H.O.M.E because both my wife and I worked with the elderly for many years, and both of us knew the situation of the elderly poor. One of the predicaments of those elderly poor, beside the lack of enough funds for medications, for doctors, and for food, is of course the lack of funds for decent housing.
So of course in the beginning we started very small. It was 3 of them, and all we had was a little van. And we started with moving mostly. But the word spread pretty quickly that there was a group out there that would help elderly people with subsidized housing, do all the legwork, all the things that very often elderly people can't do for themselves. So there was a lot of work out there for us, and there still is.
When I first heard about H.O.M.E, I thought, housing opportunities and maintenance for the elderly. What do I care? I'm not elderly. I don't need housing. But when you meet the people of H.O.M.E, you can get hooked. For dozens of H.O.M.E volunteers, their idea of a good time is to throw a painting party just after dawn in a senior citizen housing project.
I've been involved with H.O.M.E for about 6 years. I've done everything really that a volunteer can do, including moving elderly people, painting apartments, painting hallways. It's really direct work, something that's going to really affect the elderly person. And that's what I enjoy most about it.
At the H.O.M.E warehouse, volunteers pack household items to be delivered to the elderly poor. The full-time moving crew delivers donated furniture to seniors who need it.
When we first started moving, we really didn't know what we were doing. Every day I had to recruit young men, 2 or 3, to help us, depending upon how big the moves were. And so it was always an adventure. Most of them didn't want to come back because it was pretty hard work. But I remember one big move we had, I got lucky. I found Red, who is now the director of our moving crew. He's been with me ever since for the last 7 years. So things evolved from a very simple beginning to a rather sophisticated moving crew that we have now.
When I first met Stanley, he was living in a very dingy little basement where he paid more than 70% of his income for rent. I helped him with all the application process for subsidized housing, and finally we were able to look at one in his neighborhood where he really wanted to be.
Yeah, that sounds like about I was contacted by Mrs. Ward, who was about to be evicted from her furnished room. She was living in a single-room apartment that was practically unlivable for a person in her condition. The apartment was up a flight of stairs, the bathroom was down the hall, and the only bathtub was on the second floor of the building. I was able to help her get a wheelchair-accessible apartment in a federally subsidized building where she would be paying a lower rent.
He helped me an awful lot because I didn't know what to do. There was no clothes and then in the back of his car. Right.
Well, you feel like you can get up and go now?
Get the wheelchair.
You need the wheelchair, or you want to grab onto this arm?
You make that me
Come on, get this arm.
You make that me fall.
No, I won't let you fall.
It's
it's two of us here. Okay, you're almost down. One more. Here we go. We move about 2 people a day. That's the basic day. 2 moves a day, then we go out and pick furniture up for them. It don't matter whether it's the 3rd floor or the 4th floor, we move them. Summer, spring, winter, and fall. Every day, all day. We furnish the apartments for free. We give them furniture for free. Out of the bad homes into the good homes. This is all yours, though, babe. You can take it to Mississippi if you want to. It's all yours. They usually try to give us tips, but we tell them to donate it to home or keep it for things that they can use around the house. Most of the time, the response is a cry.
This is beautiful. Okay. Yes, you couldn't have did no better.
Yeah, just like a millionaire.
They always cry.
Having a clean, neat, affordable apartment doesn't necessarily mean you're living. You still have to eat. You have to get to the store. And if you're 85 or 95, it gets a little tricky. The people of H.O.M.E have figured out how to do that too. The H.O.M.E shopping bus makes regular stops at senior citizens' buildings around the city. It takes the residents to supermarkets they couldn't get to on foot, where they can find a wider selection of foods and stretch their dollars.
This does afford us a great deal of safety and prevent crime and pocketbook snatching by some of the little gangsters, and this is much appreciated.
H.O.M.E provides moving, furniture, and shopping. But their most brilliant idea, the idea that sets them apart from any other outfit in the business, makes them #1 in the business, is their concept of intergenerational shared housing.
It was Lilo really who had the first idea to have permanent houses where there will be this type of mixture, and not nursing homes, not retirement homes in quote, but intergenerational shared living communities.
Michael and Lilo are planning to build a new home that will bring people of many different ages together under the same roof. H.O.M.E has already tried out this intergenerational idea on a smaller scale. In 1983, they started the Pat Crowley House, a converted 6-flat that's now home to 11 seniors, 4 students, and a family with 2 young children. In 1985, H.O.M.E established the Oak Park House, where 15 seniors and 5 students now live.
Oh, yeah. I used to drink, gamble. When I got out here, why, I give all that stuff up. I'm sort of a home boy now.
Shared housing helps widowed seniors break out of isolation and enter a real community. The students receive free room and board for helping around the house. And the children at the Pat Crowley House enjoy the luxury of having 4 big sisters and a dozen grandparents.
Okay, do this one now.
You don't get that old feeling where you look out the window and look at the people going by. We go downstairs and we talk to the people and we make jokes. They're not funny jokes, but we think they're funny, you know, and we laugh. And that's, I think, keeps us young and happy here, you know.
And then finally, he asked me for a date, so I went out with him. We only went out a month till we were married.
You went out a month and got married?
Mm-hmm. That's all you need.
You like that guy?
Did you? No, I couldn't stand him. He fell all over the mound. He did everything that a picture shouldn't do.
There was no ballet
But
dancer.
he was successful.
He was.
It's just me. I just didn't like his style.
That's
all.
what makes a game.
He promised to tell them when the circus was coming back again. Okay, next page.
I know how it's good.
Cooler grin as the pound puppies rode off in Nabbitt's truck. He was already wondering about. Let me read it. You kids do your thing. I gotta hear what happens.
They're gonna go inside.
Don't tell me what happens. Get out of here. And a few people get bugged with the kids here. I mean, you got to say so. You know, they don't want the little kids around. I do, because they keep you hopping.
You give me my intro? All right. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see. Through many dangers, toils, and fears, we have already gone. 'Twas grace that brought us safe this far, and grace will bring us home.
There is going to be a special house someday, you know, that is going to be called the Nathalie Salmon House, which, of course, you know, Nathalie is Michael and Lego's daughter, their only child. And they wanted this special house in her memory. But knowing her, how beautiful this girl was and how beautiful she was inside, you know, what a giving person she was, whatnot, that house has got to stand behind that name.
This is where the Nathalie Salmon House will be, right on this lot. I know it for a fact because I've already booked a room on the 4th floor with a fine view of Lake Michigan over there. I couldn't be happier for anyone than I will be for Michael and Lilo Salmon and the people of H.O.M.E and the people who will live in this home the day that it's finished. I don't know what to say after that. I don't know how to ask for money.
Well, I work for WBEZ and I know how to ask for money. So please go to homeseniors.org/donate to make your gift to H.O.M.E in order to continue the vision and the love of Lilo and Michael Salmon in memory of their daughter, Nathalie. 1992 was a special, memorable year for myself. My grandfather passed away My grandparents raised me, and so I lived with them. And the last couple of years of his life were tough years. He died from Parkinson's, and I can tell you that to be able to live with him, take care of him, have my mom take care of him, and have my nephew take care of him, 4 generations of Bynums under the same roof. It did so much for his soul, for his spirit, and it helped us when we were dealing with his transition. And so this concept of intergenerational living is not something that we should do because we're being magnanimous. It's something that we should do because it reminds us of what is human. It reminds us of the importance of wisdom that is in short supply these days. Knowledge and wisdom are not the same. Many of us have knowledge. The internet gives you knowledge, but very few things give you wisdom. And so please support H.O.M.E and its vision of a Chicago where people of all ages live together in a way that supports older adults' connection to a larger community. And so what does that mean, this vision of intergenerational housing, especially today? Does it represent a cultural shift? What exactly does it mean? How do we build these beloved communities when social connection is challenged by distancing requirements? And even when we weren't distancing and we weren't on Zoom, technology has a way of isolating us, sort of the opposite of what it at least should be doing. And so right now in this moment, as we enter what some are calling a post-COVID reality, are we any closer to truly intergenerational housing, an intergenerational community, an intergenerational Chicago? And so we're going to have that discussion right now, and I would like to invite our panelists to come on to each provide a brief introduction of themselves. They will audio describe themselves, and then they'll share with us their connection to home. And so why don't we start with Jacqueline. Jacqueline, please come on and introduce yourself to our attendees.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me, and hello, good evening to everyone. I hope you're well. My name is Jacqueline Boyd. My pronouns are she, her, and they, them. I'm the co-chair of an organization called One Roof Chicago, and before I was a co-chair, I've been a fan of H.O.M.E for over 15 years. I'm a social worker and entrepreneur in the Chicago area, and have just admired the way that H.O.M.E does intergenerational housing in a way that puts people at ease and fosters connection. I'm African American, I'm wearing red glasses and a blue shirt. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacqueline. And now we'll have Pat come on and introduce herself. Do we have Pat? Okay. Or while we're trying to connect with Pat, we'll have Gail introduce herself.
Hi, thank you so much, Steve. I'm Gail Schechter. I have the privilege and honor of being the executive director of H.O.M.E. And I'll describe myself as white, wearing glasses, sitting in my office at home, and very happy to be here.
Oh, you're much more than just glasses sitting in the office. It's actually Gail who got me hooked into this whole concept. So, you know, once Gail gets her meat hooks into you, that's it, it's over. So, thank you so much, Gail, for inviting me.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to be here. And so just do a little more housekeeping before we begin our discussion. And please, you can let me know on Pat whenever she comes back on, and then I'll bring her back into the conversation. But we have a Q&A box. You can put your questions into that box, which is separate from the chat box. But if you accidentally put your question into chat, then someone will be happy to move that question over to the Q&A box. And then also, we have a raffle. And so please make those contributions at homeseniors.org/donate. And you will become eligible for some nice prizes, as well as furthering this extraordinary mission. And so, Gail, you know, let's just get started with you. What does H.O.M.E.'s vision of a Chicago where people of all ages live together, supporting adults, connecting to a larger community. I mentioned that before, but I mean, you know, it's word salad unless you put some context into it. So what is it and why is it important?
H.O.M.E's vision is a vision of defiance as much as it's a vision of the beloved community. It's a vision in defiance of the forces of a ruthless modern culture that separates us on the basis of age. The roots of our vision go back to the aftermath of World War II in Europe, when Little Brothers of the Poor, of which H.O.M.E descends, reached out to older widows and widowers who were ignored and denied not only food, but their basic humanity by a society that didn't seem to learn any lessons from a genocidal war. In establishing H.O.M.E in Chicago in 1982, our founders, whom you saw in the video, Lilo and Michelle Salmon, espoused a philosophy of deep respect for older people. Since Chicago is also one of the most racially segregated cities in the country, that deep respect manifests itself into situating from margin to center the people whose society values the least. That is older people who are also poor, or who are also people of color, or immigrants, or LGBT, or who live in Black or brown neighborhoods. So a Chicago that supports older adults' connection to the larger community is a Chicago that does not turn older people into receptacles of need, in effect turning them into a problem, requiring a solution of shuttling them into disabling institutions. John McKnight, a Chicago civil rights visionary and a mentor of mine, and Pat Abrams, who is here as well, calls this scenario, in a supreme understatement, a, quote, non-community environment. Instead, the Chicago of our vision empowers its low-income older residents by treating them as autonomous beings and full citizens woven into the vibrancy of the city. As McKnight has written, and I quote, paradoxically, the lives of vulnerable people improve significantly when they leave service systems and become effectively incorporated into community life. Therefore, the challenge is to create policies that stimulate the hospitality of citizen associations and community groups so that they will incorporate and share the capacities and gifts of those who have been excluded because of their labels. So this is the vision of H.O.M.E for Chicago.
We'll get into some specifics about your projects and the work that you're doing, but for you, Jacqueline, as well as Gail, I wanted to just, Gail, when you said in your statement and in your response, you said something that really struck me when the Salmons came to this country and after the Great World War II. And one of the things that we learned more about the cheapness of life, how dispensable human beings are, whether it's millions perished in the Holocaust, or whether it's human beings being thrown into meat grinders in war, people being internally and externally displaced, DP camps, all of it. And we're in this moment now where this virus and the resulting economic collapse and the murder of George Floyd has also revealed, well, not revealed, but just reminded us about the cheapness of life. And I think about that in terms of our older citizens, that again, we have to find somewhere to put them. And that unless they're greeting you at Walmart, they don't really, or giving us gifts at holidays, they don't really have anything to contribute, not really. And I know that infuriates a lot of older people. So I would just, Jacqueline, I'll go to you, just this whole concept about the cheapness of life within the context of COVID, racial reckoning, how we think about those who need our help, and just what thoughts come to mind for you.
Well, thank you for the context of that question. And I think it's so important to draw the line between history and the history of our communities in relationship to are looking not just along the lines of race, but we're LGBTQ plus focused community experienced during the HIV epidemic. And how do you, when you have trauma in your history as an individual or as a community, how do you trust? How do you heal? How do you build connection in an authentic way? So I think that, you know, as a Black woman in this moment, I see my communities in crisis, in mental health crises in particular, because we've been in this pandemic for a year and a half. And when you have people who don't have access to healthcare, who don't have access to mental health services, and are disconnected from their community, as our elders are, you start to see increased rates of depression and anxiety. And all of those things are made better when you're living in an intergenerational community, because you have people to check on you, people that will support you. So that's some of what comes to mind for me.
Thank you, Jacqueline. Gail, I throw that to you as well, and also within the context of this week being the 31st anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act. Amazingly, the late 20th century, before we decided as a country that people with disabilities were entitled to civil rights. Nonetheless, monumental law, and President Biden has pledged to strengthen that law and expand it. So within the context of your statement, the cheapness of life, and this week and that anniversary, what thoughts come to mind for you?
Yes, I think that a lot of the problem in our it's a big global casting of our economy, that people are not seen as people but as economic units, which is, I think, a big reason why we've treated seniors the way we have, because when people, quote, retire, or if they have a disability and they can't be in the what's called the productive workforce, it's like they're not actually beings. I mean, even in this Facebook era, if you don't have a Facebook page, you're not a person. And with the Americans with Disabilities Act, my area of expertise is fair housing. And I think it's important to note that when the Fair Housing Act was passed in 1968, you know, days after Dr. King was assassinated, people with disabilities were not even, women were not protected. People with disabilities were not protected. Those protections were added many years later, certainly with people with disabilities and families with children as well. There was rampant discrimination of families with children until the 1988 amendments to the Fair Housing Act. So I think it says a lot about how we cheapen human life if we're not producing widgets in our daily lives.
What do you hear from your residents in that regard? What stories do they tell? How are they feeling about living in these homes and how it's changed their lives? And
yeah, it's wonderful to hear them, and I'm hoping that while they're at the gathering at Nathalie Salmon House, they're exchanging stories as well. But when they move into our buildings, they feel like they matter, you know, that they have a place at home, and they've had full lives. You know, we all bring with ourselves our stories and our talents and our gifts. And we have a resident who makes jewelry, for example, you know, people who do just a variety of things, and the same with our community programs. So as you could see in the video, our programs have changed somewhat, but it's the same thought. We do, instead of moving furniture, we go into people's homes on the south and west sides and make home repairs for seniors. And they're incredibly grateful, and they have amazing stories. I've been spending the last few months calling the seniors that we've worked with, and I'm hearing stories about one man who played the church organ for 40 years, and another woman who had made all her clothes and for other people. And one thing that, by the way, has been hard for them during the pandemic is they haven't been able to share of themselves and have had to stay in their four walls.
Yeah, that gets me to a question that Philister, an attendee, has. We're still in the midst of a pandemic, and what are you hearing that elders in Chicago need as we continue to navigate this new way of living and being in this moment?
I think Jacqueline would be good in responding to this.
Jacqueline, please. And by the way, we are trying to get Pat back on, but we're having technical difficulties. So right now it's the three of us. Go ahead, Jacqueline.
Thank you so much. As I mentioned, I'm a co-chair of One Roof Chicago. I'm also the owner of a care management company that works throughout Chicagoland. So we have seniors of all ages, some living with families, some living by themselves. But I still, the social connection and the feeling that they're not forgotten is really important. I think also our seniors need room to grieve what they've dealt with, the ways that this pandemic continues to bring up other losses, the ways that many of them are losing friends and compatriots every day, every week, every month. And the other thing that I'm really seeing is a need for, I'm going to say a holding around change, because there has been so much change that in our role as planning for care or suggesting, well, maybe a place like home would be a good fit for you for such and such reason. It takes time, and it takes a lot of patience for people to make these decisions. So part of what I would encourage anyone who's watching to do is check in with your seniors and ask questions, see how they're doing, see what would bring value to their life. And if they're at a crossroads or making difficult choices, talk it through with them without thinking that you know the answer. Because I tell you, there are so many people that we work with where you think you can see the right answer for them, but seniors are no different than any of us. Right. Strong opinions, very independent, and know what they want. So follow their lead is what I would say.
That's right. Thank you. And so just getting to another question for you, Jacqueline. So you spoke about systemic racism, and we as African Americans and other marginalized groups, we've been identifying the problem for centuries. But when we talk about dismantling this systemic racism and the practice of racism, how do you see intergenerational housing and communities playing a role in deconstructing that system?
Well, I think that if an organization is intentional in bringing together and being as inclusive as possible in who they invite to be residents, in who they hire and recruit, as I've seen with H.O.M.E, you create something really special, especially in a city like Chicago that's so segregated. As a care manager, I have my clients who are Black all the time say, I don't want to live North Side. I know I'm going to be the only Black person in that senior facility, and that's not comfortable for me. Or for my gay or queer clients to say the same thing. I don't want to be alone in my home. The first time I walked up to Nathalie Salmon House, there was a gay older gentleman who invited me in, said, come on in. He didn't know me from anybody. And when I got to the Good Life floor, my heart was touched, because I saw women that looked like my grandmother coming in and out of their rooms, sharing food, talking with the RAs. And I think that it starts with intention, connection, education, which I know H.O.M.E has invested in over the years to continue to look at the way that as a housing organization, you have to push back against redlining and against the way funding is biased. We have to push back in a lot of ways and be very intentional about that. So I know H.O.M.E is on a journey, but they've been doing this work since before it was top of mind in our news cycle. So I think it's every part of your policies, procedures, and practices. We have to look at racial equity moving forward. And I'm grateful that H.O.M.E already has been.
Gail, you've made it clear, not only with your work for H.O.M.E, but your other work and activism in your life, that most of these issues are justice issues at their core. So when you think about this issue in particular, what justice issues spring to mind for you?
Certainly issues of equity and investment immediately come to mind. The people that we serve on the South and West sides through our programs, and that we're going to be serving, we're looking forward to with Pat Abrams' group, the Renaissance Collaborative, in a new intergenerational building that we're planning. They're living in communities that have suffered from systemic disinvestment by the powers that be, by government, by private investors. Now, in the last year, you mentioned the awakening that came with George Floyd. Some of that is changing, but we have to keep pushing. We can't just, for H.O.M.E, the shopping bus, the moving program, upkeep and repair is certainly about helping people live their best lives, live their lives the way they want it, literally meeting them where they're at. But there has to be that other step of, okay, how about getting that grocery store in that neighborhood that doesn't have one, or helping to make the streets safe for older people to walk in. So that's one thing is investment, and the other is certainly enforcement of rights, fair housing rights, the right not to be discriminated against, the right to move into the neighborhood of your choice, and tenants' rights. Those are big justice issues that are very important to H.O.M.E. And then I should mention a final one is who is at the table. As Jacqueline was starting to mention, who is making the decisions. And so it's important to H.O.M.E that we start to have the people that we serve be reflected in our governance and certainly the governance of the towns we live in.
Thank you, Gail. And so let's talk about what you're doing now and share some of your plans so that people have an idea that the grass is not growing under your feet.
Shall I start with H.O.M.E? Yeah, because we're excited to be working both with the Renaissance Collaborative and with Jacqueline's group, One Roof Chicago. And actually, since the One Roof Chicago slide is up first, I'm going to defer to Jacqueline. Our partnership with One Roof is really to help consult on our model. And I'm not going to give away all of what this is and send this to Jacqueline.
Thank you so much. And Steve, I also wanted to let you know, Steve, that I believe Pat is a panelist now. So hopefully after I say mine, we can invite Pat to say a few words.
Absolutely.
Lovely. So One Roof Chicago is an emerging organization. We have been working very, very hard for the last 3 years to develop LGBTQ+ focused intergenerational housing, where young people and older adults can live comfortably and safely in community together. We are hoping to develop a job training element so that we can provide a pathway to professional careers and opportunities for the LGBTQ youth that live in the home and are part of our wider communities. We can go on to the next slide, Cassidy. We are mission-centered, much like H.O.M.E is, and so that's why our collaboration is such a good fit, because H.O.M.E is doing something different, and we want to create an environment that people are excited to be in, where they feel comfortable and can be their fully authentic selves. So this is some of what we have going on and how we operate. We come from a trauma-informed perspective because we understand that the young people that will be living in our building likely have experienced violence, homelessness, joblessness or underemployment, food insecurity, and that many of our seniors might have as well. So we are collaborating with H.O.M.E and with Brave Space Alliance in the year ahead to build out what our model looks like so that we can keep our seniors and youth all comfortably and happily under one roof. So hopefully we can pass it to Pat, if Pat's microphone is working.
Please do, Pat. Please introduce yourself to our audience, and we'd love to hear some remarks from you. Pat is, okay.
Can you hear me now?
Sure can.
Okay, I'm sorry, this has been a journey to get connected to you all. I'm Pat Abrams, I'm the Executive Director of the Renaissance Collaborative and excited to be a part of the panel and listening to what we think is a dream kind of vision. We started this conversation back in 2005 with a group of elderly seniors in various churches in the Bronzeville area. And the seniors themselves said to us, no one is really trying to help our colleagues who are forced to raise their grandkids again, because there's a middle generation that's missing. And we need to figure out how to support them because they don't have the funds to take care of kids. They're in the latter parts of their life, later parts of their life, and they're barely having enough funds to take care of their own rent, not to mention taking care of children. So we, as a coalition of churches from the Bronzeville area, decided that that was a community issue that we should address. So in 2005, we started this journey. And we found that, I mean, I think one of the things you said, Steve, made a lot of sense is what people have been used to. I don't know why it's different outside of the fact that funding sources sort of predicts what you develop. Believe it or not, there are policies that restrict who can live where and how. And so our first venture into senior housing was for a 202 housing for seniors, which is 62 and up. And that was all a part of what we considered the senior village. The second building, which we're doing now with homes that we're excited about, is the intergenerational building. And we've always called it the intergenerational building because we promised those seniors who are raising dependents that that would be building 2. So there were people who were interested in helping their colleagues. They just didn't want the kids living next to them. And then we thought there were seniors who liked having kids next to them because that's what life used to be like for most of us, that, we took care of every household was multi-generational. There was, and then the workforce, I think, is what forced people to break up families. So you have one sibling living in one side of the country and the other one living on the other side of the country, and the parents still living somewhere in between. So there's a lot of interest in how do you develop a scenario where people live in communities, seniors live in communities. The majority of seniors still do live in communities, and they age in communities, and they're intergenerational. I mean, very few people live in senior housing. When you think about a city the size of Chicago, most people live in communities. And I think seniors really hate that no one really, people think when they're a certain age, they should be put out to pasture because they can't contribute anymore. And I think, as you said, we're short on wisdom, and that's one of the things I think that we are missing in this in the city. We don't value wisdom as much as we should.
And just to the audience, we're probably going to run a few minutes over because we're so happy to have Pat join us. And I wanted to direct a question toward you that, and you spoke about it a little bit in your previous response, this sort of implicit bias by funders, foundations, government, you name it. And Gail, Jacqueline, please jump in on this. How creating an intergenerational culture as well as this intergenerational housing, it seems like we have to overcome this implicit bias within these institutions and funding sources because, as you said, Pat, you have organizations tailoring their mission or their or what they're trying to accomplish based on where they can get the money rather than necessarily the needs of a community. I mean, let's face it, you know, there weren't any grants out there, Jacqueline, for LGBTQIA+, you know, seniors, right? That's something that had to be forged, something where you had to kind of bring and then justify.
Right.
Why? I know Chicago Community Trust, McCarthy, some other organizations have, they've been funneling money in the last couple of years. That's great. But there's still this implicit bias where these moneyed institutions, hundreds of millions, billions of dollars, and then you have all these well-meaning, all-worthy organizations, almost like this gladiatorial coliseum fighting for them, you know, competing with one another. So, you know, just Pat, just how do we deconstruct and overcome this bias in order to, so that these initiatives are being funded for their own sake, not because it justifies some institutions, you know?
I think the first thing we can do, Steve, is put ourselves in that position. I'm now at the age where I'm a senior, and I find myself talking about our senior building, and I said, hey, that's me. You know, so I think that's the first thing we can do is in terms of changing the perception that's out there that seniors mean you don't contribute anymore. You have to be set aside. Like they say in the animal term, you put out to pasture because you've contributed what they think is your best years. And I think that has something to do with how we look at the workforce, that at a certain age, people are expected to retire and go away, right away in the sunset or something. So there are lots of us who continue to work in the sunset. And I think we don't want to be set aside in an environment where it's just our age group. We prefer to be within the family unit, if you will. So there are people of all ages in a family. It's not just one particular group. And I think that would go a long way if we start envisioning ourselves being set aside or put aside or whatever, to creating this intergenerational concept and model that really sort of looks at who we are as a community, as a city, as a society.
I would just add to what Pat says, and you're absolutely right, that they really are little boxes. What these big financing entities, they can only see senior only housing, or you know, or market rate housing, but it's even further than that. We've had a hard time even communicating the value of communal living. So you could see in the film, Pat Crowley House. Right. You've got seniors, younger resident assistants living and working in the building, and families, and we have that as a floor of Nathalie Salmon, and we'll have that as a floor in this building, the second floor. A lot of funders can't wrap their head around that. They're insisting that every one of even though they'll eat communally, every unit is going to have a kitchen in it. You know, like right. They don't understand that sometimes people really want to live in community. And so there really is a lot of education that we have to do. And what we're all hoping, our three organizations, is that by making this happen, and believe me, Teresa Prim of Prim Lawrence Group has approached, you know, about 5 different funders to fund the different types of permutations of people who are going to live in this building, that will come up with something that will be a model in general society and not just for affordable housing.
Right.
I'd like to chime in here and just share, I think it's important for funders to be deeply aware of the power dynamic and the way that power is at play in everything from putting in an application. Like there can be real barriers to access just in getting connected to funders, right? And getting that meeting to get more information to see if your organization is appropriate, to complete a 25-page grant application, to have, a history of already being successful. I think funders have an opportunity in this moment to keep the eye on justice and not turn away the moment Black folks are out of the news cycle and the moment that COVID is out of the news cycle. I've seen that happen. I facilitate an executive director support group here in Chicago, and the Black executive directors have experienced funders saying, well, Trump's out of office, everything's different now, so we're not funding organizations like yours in the same way anymore. It was just for a year or two, which is heartbreaking because you don't undo 400 years of history with 1 year of funding. So I think funders have an opportunity to keep the eye on justice, be aware of the barriers that folks on the ground have to even accessing their organizations, let alone proving themselves as worthy enough to be funded. So I think the onus is on the funders to change the game and come collaborate with community in a new way.
Well, they've been saying lately that implicit bias and analyzing that is very important. So hopefully they will follow through. We're going to go into our question and answer session now. So as I said before, there's a Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. Please feel free to type in your questions and we'll throw them at the panelists. And while we're waiting for the questions, there were a couple of statements from our audience. And so I want to read one of them. And so this comes from Gregory. The lives of seniors have great value, as are the lives of neighbors, communities who are not white and able and or wealthy citizens. Capitalism defines the gates through which human value can be aggregated into groups, classes whose rights can be dismissed or disavowed. We control the limits of capitalism, bias, and wealth distribution, not the other way around. Dignity and value to society and community do not equate with wealth or race or health. Denial of these equations takes many personal decisions about your values that are easy to deny publicly, but not easy privately. Free your minds and hearts by joining the work, not just intention, to create a neighborhood that transcends party, area, and politics. And I want you, Susan Gregory, to be my spokesperson for my next non-for-profit con, because that is extraordinary. And you can become part of this work and, heed Susan's call by going to homeseniors.org/donate and giving. And then we also have a statement by Sue. And Sue said, Nathalie Salmon House is at Sherwin and Sheridan Avenue in Chicago's Rogers Park neighborhood. Yes, and has been open for decades. My later brother-in-law, Benny, lived there for several years until he died in 2006. So we're so thankful that H.O.M.E and that Nathalie Salmon House was there for your loved one. So in any event, we are taking your questions, and someone commented on how inspirational the video was that we just saw. So you can type in your questions, and by typing your questions that we can answer, but also go to homeseniors.org/donate. And so while we're waiting, I guess what I wanted to throw out there, what are some of your general thoughts about the next few months as we transition from one era of COVID into another era of COVID, because we're going to be in the era of COVID for a very long time. And especially considering where seniors and those who live in nursing homes, and Jacqueline, the work that you've done, they're so vulnerable. From a policy perspective, what do you want to see? We'll start with you, Jacqueline, and go to Pat. What do you want to see in the next few months that will be a signal to you whether it's state, county, city, federal funding, or initiatives, that we're moving in the right direction and taking all of these things into consideration?
Well, I wish that the problems that were revealed during COVID could be solved in a few months. I think it's going to take more systemic change. So the things that I would like to see are universal health care, so that people could have access to quality health care, could get preventative care that wouldn't have led to members of my communities, Black and Brown and LGBTQ plus communities, dying in higher numbers during COVID that we saw. So I think universal healthcare is something I would love to see as a large scale policy change. And I think an investment in different types of housing at a federal level and at a state level would make a huge difference. One of the challenges that we're having is, unless you get a nursing home license, it's really difficult to have a continuum of care where our seniors can come in and be in independent living. They could be in some version of assisted or supportive living, kind of like the Good Life does, and then be able to pass comfortably in their home. For LGBTQ seniors in particular, when you're most vulnerable, that's not when you want to change and leave your home and go to a nursing home. We want to be able to provide the continuum of care. The US is years behind on intergenerational housing. So I think, and we know that we have a housing crisis across our country. So healthcare, housing, I think would begin to fix some of these foundations that have caused this devastation in our communities.
Pat, what comes to mind for you? What policy shifts do you want to see, investments?
Well, I think for me, I'm reflecting on a message that the presiding bishop of the Episcopal Church said last night. We need a revolution. We can no longer chip at the issues from the side. If we were truly a community, now we tried to model this during the past year based on some of the connections that we made. We actually told our seniors to stay in, and people from without brought food every day, 3 meals a day for every senior in our apartment, which is what I was raised to do. You know, when you're in a community, people who were seniors were taken care of by people who had kids, and they would just tell you to go down there and take care of this and take care of that. And you did it. You didn't even think about, well, I don't know that person, or I'm not supposed to do for that person. You did it because your parents told you to do it, and because the elderly was considered a vital part of the community. You know, they were uncles and aunts, or people called them uncles and aunts, whether they were connected to them or not. So you call those people uncles and aunts, and you did what was necessary to take care of them. I think when you lose a sense of connections and community, you lose everything. You lose the humanity, which is what this country sorely needs or is lacking. You know, there is no humanity. It's all about me. It's about me and about mine. And then we were talking about pronouns. Those are the pronouns that Americans have gotten adjusted to. Me, myself, and I are the only people that matters.
Thank you, Pat. Gail?
Yeah, I would only add to what Jacqueline and Pat already said, because they were right on. I would say that one of the things that we learned in the pandemic is something that, that we at home have figured out a long time ago, which is that community is a health issue, is a health solution. So a lot of us, I think we've all experienced at this point what it's like to be isolated, what it's like to be quarantined. Well, imagine that is the experience that a lot of the seniors that we work with have faced, not only because of their age, but because of poverty. So one of the things that's great is because we have resident assistants, because we've had younger people who live and work in the building, or work as well as live in the building, that they were actually part of the solution. They were able to provide companionship and even basic cooking. You know, people were each other's, you know, sort of antidote to living in a pandemic world. And so it was nice to see that benefit to the model. The other thing that I would mention is that we have this spendthrift society that works on treatments and not prevention. So we don't really do a good job of preventing people from ending up in a situation where they might have to live in a nursing home because there's no other place they can go. One of the things that H.O.M.E has been doing, as I mentioned, our upkeep and repair program, is that we look at, you know, very low cost things that we can do to make it inexpensive to retrofit just the bathroom in your home so that you can age and not fall and end up in the ER and with your life shortened. And one of the things that I didn't realize until we started doing this is that Medicare does not cover assistive devices, or some assistive devices, but even just little things that can make your life exponentially easier are not covered. So, you know, that's certainly a policy fix that we can be looking at in addition to working toward the revolution.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And so I wanted to also let the audience know that if you have any questions that pop into mind later, because inevitably once an event's over, you go, oh, I could have asked this, I could have asked that. Go to info@homeseniors.org with your question or any information you'd like, and we'll be sure to get that information to you, and that's being put into the chat box now. And so just to ask a wrap-up question.
Oh, Steve, you'll have to try again.
Did I just mute myself?
Yeah.
Did you hear any of that?
No. But Steve, I also just wanted you to know there are some questions in the Q&A for the panelists. So I don't know if we want to answer some of those live or should try to answer them online.
You know, we can, well, why don't we do this? If the audience willing to stick with us, we can get through a couple of them. So one question is, are the challenges you have observed for our senior communities in Chicago unique to Chicago? Or are you noticing the needs and issues are in common throughout the United States?
Throughout the United States.
Well, I can start just quickly and say they're not unique. I mean, certainly the segregation, the racial segregation levels in Chicago are, although they're shared, they're especially egregious in Chicago. So, so I would certainly say that. And you know, one of the things that I've been very interested in is, you know, we've seen that the Black population has been leaving the city of Chicago, and they've left other cities as well, but Chicago's especially high. And I'm just curious to what extent that has to do with issues of affordability. To what extent are they older people? Are they young people? Who are the people who are moving? And how can what we are trying to do as intergenerational housing providers, what we can do to help stabilize the community?
Let's see, another question. As eviction and foreclosures become reality for many people currently housed, how is the best way to support displaced residents? Is there a state, county, or metro area organization leading that work? To your knowledge, can someone answer that? Or if there's someone in the audience who can, you can put that into the chat box.
Well, there are a number of, I don't know, Pat, if you wanted to answer that.
There are a lot of organizations that's working on that issue. You know, and it's a strange dichotomy, because the people who are affordable housing providers, who are the nonprofit affordable housing providers, also have notes, mortgage notes that must be paid. So it's always a balancing act between if they're going to get money to pay those mortgages, or will they get foreclosed on? And if they're foreclosed on, 9 times out of 10, private developers will end up dumping that building and having it converted into a condominium, especially if in fact it's in a location that's desirable. So it's a way of getting rid of a more affordable housing in the city of Chicago. So it's a balancing act. How do you support one agenda and yet be mindful of the agendas of those individuals who are really developing for-profit housing and take advantage of what's happening in the market that will lead you to have less affordable housing than more.
Here is a question from an anonymous attendee that goes to the M in home. That's maintenance. I love the intergenerational housing model, knowing how hard it can be to live communally. I'm curious how these communities are supported in their interpersonal dynamics. Are they self-organized and make all their systems and rules on their own, or do you come in and work with them on how to essentially get along with each other and, you know, in conflict resolution and such? Please, I'd love to hear from all three of you on that one.
Yeah, actually, if Beth wants to say something to that.
Beth LaBrosse?
Beth LaBrosse, because that is part of her role, is to help facilitate activities for residents, but not for them, with them.
There's Beth going around the house right now. We could even ask the people there. Beth, your thoughts?
Wave to the people, everybody.
Well, they're getting along now because there's looks like cake and cookies and brownies.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. But what about when there is no cake?
So what the model we have here, pardon the slight echo, is yes, it's directed maybe, or right now because we're getting out of COVID, directed by staff, but the object is to get resident involvement, have them work out what they would like to do for programming, and then let them fly. It's their home and their space, and it's about them.
They're all adults.
Yep.
If only more people understood that, whoever shouted.
We eligible. We live.
I would also add to that architecture matters. I mean, you see that this is a community room here. There's another room at the opposite end called the garden room that we want to fix up. The residents themselves are helping to design it. But, you know, is the architecture inviting? Do people feel they can meet in large groups and small groups? And that's part of what we're also trying to do with our new, you know, the new building is it's in the works.
Right. Jacqueline?
I was just going to say that I think, you know, it depends on where you're at in your development. Like for us, I was so inspired by the video and just thinking about the power that a visionary or two can have, right, in creating something new. And H.O.M.E has been doing that for a long time. And so I think it's having shared vision and having shared intention and values, right? So for us, as we think about the home that we'll have, we want to have some agreements, some understanding of what can you expect, right? What's the culture that's already been developed, and are we the right fit for you? Because you might have a different expectation. So I think a lot of it happens in the mutual choosing at the beginning of the relationship, and then having good pathways for communication. I know H.O.M.E has a concerned residents group, which I love, because most housing organizations would say a senior advisory board, which when it's your house, you are concerned. you want to be known because your voice matters. So I just think everything from the language to creating those spaces makes a huge difference.
Had any thoughts about that big beautiful home is going up and people get into disputes? How's that worked out?
Well, I think it's important that you have some tenant selection criteria. As Jacqueline said, people need to self-assess whether they want to live in a certain environment. That needs to be talked about up front. I mean, we do permanent supportive housing for former homeless as well. And those same conversations have to be held up front before the move in, because if it's not a fit, then you don't want the person there, and the person's not going to want to be there. So you're going to have conflicts forever. You might as well get the conversation going up front.
Great, thank you. Well, first of all, I want to just thank everyone, be respectful of your time. I could go on and on and on, because I mean that. I'm very passionate about this topic, but you know, sitting on our bums for 90 minutes, that's enough. So in any event, I want to thank Jacqueline Boyd. I want to thank Gail Schechter and Pat Abrams. And thank you, Beth LaBrosse. Beth, turn on that camera. Let's see the people. There we go. Wave to them, everybody.
Camera, let's see.
Hey, thank you for your patience. Save me a piece of cake. It's wonderful. Bless you all. Thank you so much. Really wonderful. Thank you all.
That works.
The work of putting this together. Thank Cassidy and Zoe and everyone who worked and other people on the tech crew to make this event happen, for Sweet Home Chicago. And so again, you can support the work of H.O.M.E by going to homeseniors.org/donate. And you can find out more information as well about the partnerships that we have with Jacqueline and Pat, and so many others, as a matter of fact. And so right now we've got a raffle pull. And so Beth, take that away.
Yep, here we go. Doing some.
Feel like I'm at a telethon. It's like a Jerry Lewis telethon. We've got enough people old enough to know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Drum roll. Is that a costume mask I see someone there wearing? All right, we've got a ticket. What do we have? Mitten Champiner? Champineri. Ah, Champineri. Very good. Well, congratulations. And how many winners are we pulling? 5 more. By the way, what are some of the prizes while we're pulling these winners? We have Jenacoa
Bates.
Oh, that's Venantia by Ambrose.
Okay, very good. All right, tickets to the masterclass subscription.
All right. Next one is our Sweet Treats package, 3-month Pints Club membership to Black Dog Gelato.
Date night in Pilsen. Wayne Hansen. Wayne Hansen. Congratulations. We have 2 more or 3 more.
All right.
Wait a minute. Who's that cutie sitting there with the braids?
All right.
Right there. Right there. Who are those cuties there? Who are they?
Oh
my goodness.
Granddaughters. Do you want to wave hi?
See, that right there, intergenerational, sold, done. We can all go home.
Okay. You gotta pick one.
All right, which one's that?
Let's take a look. Courtney Varick. All right. Great.
All right.
Next package is a date night in Pilsen.
Date night in Pilsen. I'm assuming that includes food.
And a gift package to Mashallah Boutique. Yeah, just pick one. Who is it? There's no wrong answer in this one. Good. this is for Heather Ross.
Heather Ross,
Right.
congratulations.
Heather Ross.
All right.
And our last package.
Last one.
Package, Flying Saucer Banner, and a year subscription to Masterclass.
A year subscription to Masterclass.
Uh-huh.
What is Masterclass?
All right.
I'm going to assume it's a magazine where they teach you how to be a better version of.
This is for Carolyn H., which I'm assuming is Carolyn H.
Carol, is that Carolyn H? Carolyn H. Look at you. Ah, wonderful. Congratulations.
So you can tell she's very happy.
I can tell. Oh, goodness. Well, good for you. Thank you all so much. Thank you, Beth. And again, just say thank you, everyone. Thank you. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. All right.
Can we also say thank you to you, Steve? You've done a wonderful job moderating. Thank you so much for all of your hard work and efforts.
Well, thank you.
Yes, thank you so much.
All your
When
enthusiasm.
I'm doing this for you, it's really nothing to be thanked for. It's what I should be doing. So thank you. Thank you all for having me. And so Gail, would like to get some final words from you before we sign off.
Well, I absolutely want to thank you, Steve. I want to thank Jacqueline and Pat for being not only on this part of this event, but H.O.M.e's enthusiastic partners. And we're glad to partner with you to help you. We help all of us achieve our vision of an equitable Chicago. I also want to thank our sponsors. Our hometown hero level sponsor is Joseph M. Wiedemann and Sons. Mm-hmm. Our deep dish level sponsor is are the TDC Group, or the Doctors Company. And we also have the Marcella Niehoff School of Nursing of Loyola University. Next, on the Windy City level of sponsorship, we have Wintrust Bank, Alliance Bernstein, Fifth Third Bank, Aging Media Network, Motorola Solutions, Morgan Stanley, and Rush University. At our Hold the Ketchup level, we have JP Morgan, Prime Publishing, US Trust, the Federal Home Loan Bank of Chicago, and WJW Architects. And last but not least, I want to thank our staff, our board of directors, and our associates board, all of the panelists that I already mentioned, and of course, every one of you, all of our donors, and all of the older people that we serve, with a shout out to our residents at Black Hawk Manor, Pat Crowley House, and Nathalie Salmon House. And I certainly want to thank the people behind the curtain, Cassidy Olson and Zoe Bendit, who really helped to make this entire evening possible. I can't thank each and every one of you enough.
They made it so that not even I could screw it up. Thank you, Cassidy and Zoe, and thank you all for this incredible evening. And so just finally, go to homeseniors.org/donate. And what other ways can people get involved? Anyone on the panel? Pat, people want to get involved and want to make a difference collectively, institutionally. What do you need people to do when they leave this webinar? What do you want them to do?
I think they can become advocates. It doesn't cost anything to become an advocate, but people don't really realize that the city has all kinds of ordinances against communal living on unrelated families. There's an ordinance that's against that. It's not that several groups haven't wanted to do it in the past and saw the need. There's an ordinance on the books that keep people from doing it. The funders, there's a reason why things are the way they are, and it has nothing to do with what's needed. It has everything to do with the perception of what is required in order, and I think people have good intentions. I want to start with that. I think people have good intentions. They're just misplaced good intentions.
Thank you so much. So what a way to wrap. Just get involved, advocate, know the rules and ordinances and laws, those that are well known and those that are not so well known, that really get in the way of this incredible work. So once again, I'm Steve Bynum, WBEZ, Worldview Solutions. Thank you to everyone for joining us tonight. Be well.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.